Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Inheritance, book 4 of the Inheritance cycle, the Aragon series. So yeah, with that being said, we're definitely going to talk spoilers because this is the last one of the main storyline, and we're just kind of going to jump right into it. So yeah, spoilers, open total spoilers. So yeah, with that being said, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. All right, so Inheritance, I think, is actually a huge improvement over the other books. You can actually really totally see Christopher Paolini's writing skill like increase like in this book compared to Brissinger, which I find really interesting because apparently it was supposed to be one book, Brissinger and Inheritance, but apparently as Christopher kept writing it, he realized it was going to be like super long, so he split it into two books. So I find it really interesting that there's like a huge leap in like skill, or maybe he just got like so into the groove with it that it worked a lot better. But something about the way he did it, it just kind of worked a lot better in my opinion, and kind of makes for this really good comprehensive conclusion to the story. And I think he did a really good job with it. I mean, there are a couple things in it that are like fairly glaring for me that I have issues with, but on the whole, I think this is a really well done, well crafted, satisfying ending to a series. Especially when you're trying to lean as hard into classic fantasy as Christopher was. I think he actually did a really good job. But I want to kind of start off and talk about those two major negative things that I have in order to kind of, start with the negatives and end on the positives. So, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about a couple of those things. So, one of my favorite pieces about the world building for Aragon is the way in which Christopher kind of sets up a lot of these things in the first book. Like, we have the prophecy from Angela that's ultimately paid off in this book. And we also have the words from Solemnbaum, which is sort of a prophecy. So it pays off in Brissinger and it also pays off here. I guess they both would have paid off in the same book, which I don't think I would have liked much at all. But I really enjoyed the way in which the words about the look under the Manoa tree for a weapon and stuff. I really liked the way in which that came back around during Aragon's training in Elismira, and or is Elismira the Dueldenvarden. Yeah, when he was in the city of the elves and stuff, and it kind of helped him find that material he needed in order to make his sword. And I thought that was really well done, and it felt earned, even though we had this kind of, this foreshadowing that it was going to happen, kind of thing, and it worked. But when we get to the other part of the thing that Solemnbaum says, where he's talking about the Rock of Kuthian and the Vault of Souls and stuff, that in this book was not handled very well, in my opinion. The way in which we get the information about the Bright Steel in order to make Brissinger was like well done. It was earned. It kind of worked as like there's something in the back of his head, and it just kind of like led to it. It all just kind of worked. It culminated in a really satisfying way. But here we just kind of get this situation where Aragon is now the leader of the Varden because Nasawada's been kidnapped by Murtagh, and he's basically panicking. He's having panic attacks over and over. He's not sleeping and stuff. And obviously something that like a 17-year-old would stress about being the leader of like the second largest army in the country. Like that's something very understandable that will, induce panic attacks. So he immediately starts to think about what Solemnbaum said. He said, like, if you find your power is not enough and all that stuff, go to the Rock of Kuthian and say your name and open the Vault of Souls. So he doesn't really understand what that is. He doesn't know what the Rock of Kuthian is. He doesn't understand, any of that. So he goes to Solemnbaum and basically just starts whining. He basically kind of yells at Solemnbaum like, Solemnbaum explains to him that this information kind of comes from nowhere. Like all the weird cats kind of have been implanted with this information, and they're basically told if there's ever a dragon rider that's not subject to Galbatorix, then make sure you tell him this information and stuff, or tell them this information and stuff. And, that's what he did. He told him that stuff, but he doesn't know where the information comes from. He doesn't know any, greater clues or anything about it. But Aragon is like, no, you must know something. You have to know more. You need to know more, blah, blah, blah. Like, tell me more, like, to the point where Solemnbaum's ready to scratch his eyes out and stuff. And it's just really weird to me. Like, all the maturity and all the development we've been getting for Aragon for the last few books kind of goes right out the window, and he turns into a petulant little child. And he's just, like, whining and whining. See, I wouldn't really have any issue with him whining if it kind of still led to Solemnbaum, like, I don't know where the information came from. You got to go figure it out. Go deal with it. Like, if it was that kind of thing and, like, he just whined about it and then got to go figure it out. But the issue that I have with it is as soon as he's done whining, he's immediately handed the information. Like, it's so entirely unearned that it's so ridiculously unsatisfying because he doesn't know what it means. And then, like, this is, I think, the greater issue with it, right? So there's multiple clues that basically can tell him, the information he needs to know. People are like, go read Domia Abawilda, like go read it, and there's probably clues in there and stuff. And he's just, I can't read that well. I can't read that fast. This is too many words to read. I can't like. They're basically telling you the answer to your question is in this book. You just need to read and kind of look for it. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. Just tell me now. I need to know now. Just not like just whiny brat type behavior to the point where the people that originally, I assume it was the Dragons, the Eldonari that did it, but when they essentially just like kind of take over Solemnbaum immediately and put him in a trance and say, go to page blah blah blah, partway through the paragraph or whatever, and just start reading there. And like that's just the most like spoon fed, handed to answer possible. And then after he gets this information, he starts to read it, and then cops out, basically like stops reading twice. Like he reads maybe a paragraph and nothing that like jumps out at him. He doesn't read anything that jumps out to him, so he basically dismisses it like, this is stupid, this is worthless, blah blah. And he has to be told multiple times to just keep reading, just keep reading, maybe we'll find some, just keep reading. And I'm like, it's the most frustrating thing I've ever seen ever. And it's just like, it feels kind of out of character, but it feels probably appropriate for early characterization of Aragon. But like, it made me so annoyed. I'm like, why are you being this brat like this? And then it turns out this information is like literally the key to how he defeats Galbatorix and stuff. And it's just like, it's so unearned, and he got it through whining. That to me, that's like a huge like dent in the nature of the story. It's a huge backslide on his character development in a lot of ways, and it makes the conclusion of the story almost feel unearned as a result. And it just kind of bugged the absolute crap out of me. I did not like it. I was just like what? Like, dude, you've been maturing like something major, like all this kind of stuff. I'm wondering though if the reason for this petulance is because Christopher knew that Aragon was going to have to discover his true name, and as a result, get this major like self awareness kind of level of development. So therefore, now we have this huge juxtaposition between him being a whiny brat and him being this hugely self actualized, very zen understanding of himself kind of person when they come back. Maybe that was the goal. I don't know, but I did not care for it. It felt very, very just whiny and petulant, and I was like really irritated with Aragon. Okay, that was like my big issue that I had. But my second issue is it's smaller, but it's more prevalent, and it's a common issue throughout the entire series. I wonder if Christopher Paolini was a huge fan of Robert Jordan, because he clearly, like, I don't know, maybe he's just emulating the style in some sort of way, or if it's just a coincidence because it's how he interprets like the writing of like classic fantasy like this. But the same way Robert Jordan had an issue with being overly descriptive to the point of like describing ad nauseum like the dress any random character is wearing. Like Christopher gets really into the weeds with the way he describes battles and stuff like that. There's multiple small skirmishes that have no effect on the greater like battle or anything, and he goes into great detail in these things. There's like small, minute little side fights and things like that, like stuff like the Queen Islanzadi against Boss, the general guy. Like that made sense. That was perfectly relevant. All that stuff to go into great detail about all the people trying to fight him and kill him. That made sense. But there's multiple other instances that it's just like, from a directorial perspective in like a movie, I could totally see it being worth it to hop to these other places to give us a sense of the huge battle. But in terms of what the storyline is and the through line and what we're focusing on, like it just felt very extra, and it felt like prolonging for the sake of it. A lot of it felt like just Christopher really loves his world building, and I can tell he's very close. I mean, obviously he loves the world of Allegasia. It's like his baby. So he clearly didn't want to like leave the story. He just clearly wanted to kind of spend as much time with it as possible, and he probably just has so much information about the world just in his head that he just kind of kept going and kept going, because there's a lot of hints to greater world building ideas and stuff in the story, like other dragon like creatures that are in the sea and like all this kind of stuff. So a lot of that is interesting, but the nature in which he or the way in which he will like overly describe things, for me it kind of kills the pacing of some of these scenes, like especially like the final battle. It's like so much war, it is so much fighting, it is so much, I mean, it's a pitch war battle. It's like a huge huge culmination battle. It's supposed to be huge, it's supposed to be epic, but when you spend so much time describing so many like minute kind of things, it kind of kills the pacing of it for me. So it made the entire battle feel overly drawn out, which comparatively, the actual fighting of Galbatorix and like defeating him was relatively quick. So in comparison to how drawn out the battle felt, it makes the final confrontation with Galbatorix feel like it was rushed and went way too fast. So it's just like one thing that creates issues in other areas for me. The over reliance on major descriptors and like describing ad nauseum affected the pacing for me. So this book ultimately, I really did like it. And I think it was a great culmination, but I think the pacing has some issues, mostly because, like I said, the over descriptions of things. Just yeah. So all in all, though, those are like really minor things. Like not really minor, but like they're in the grand scheme of things, like it could be a lot worse. Like early Aragon had like a lot of issues, like a lot of different issues apart from it just being derivative. There was like various issues and stuff. And here, like I said, I see that Christopher Paolini definitely improved on his skill, because a lot of the story is just like really well done. There's a lot of philosophies and stuff that he's playing with and thinking about and like poking at and stuff that I think he explores it like just enough for this story, but it's like great stuff that will stick with you and it'll like, stay in your head and you'll think about it later, which I think a lot of really good stories do that. They will introduce different philosophies and concepts and stuff that will actually stick with the reader. So I think that's a that's a good mark of like a good story and good writer and stuff. And I think Christopher did that really well. So, despite the fact that I feel like the final confrontation with Galbatorix was a little rushed and kind of quick, I really, really like how it was resolved. Because initially, I kind of would have thought that there would be an issue. And let me say this also. I read Inheritance when I initially was reading the series. This was years ago, and I didn't like it back then when I first read it. But upon this reread, I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I enjoyed the other books. So, that's an interesting surprise for me. So, yeah, let's get back to talking about Galbatorix and the final fight and everything, right? So, I really like the way in which it was constructed, because we've been following Aragon, these 3 books and stuff, and every single book he's just leveling up, just completely maxed out his RPG character stats, just completely maxed them out, and then get extra help on top of it, get backup with the elves and all this kind of stuff, and then he gets the Vault of Souls and he got all these Eldenarian stuff. I thought, like, okay, at this point, he's already ridiculously powerful. He's basically countered most everything Galbatorix has that we know that he has. So, like, this battle, he's going to go into a fairly evenly fought. So, or just probably be overpowered and be stronger than Galbatorix or something like that. That felt like a real risk we were running into. So I really like the fact that even though they're so freaking powerful, Arya is ridiculously powerful. The other elves with them are powerful. As soon as they get in there, Galbatorix like no effort at all. He completely like stops them in their tracks, like with very, very little effort. Not only just because what he discovers, but his literal just skill with magic and stuff like that is just beyond theirs. Like, and Shrukin is the size of a city. So like he's just as overpowered as Aragon kind of feels sometimes. Like, it's a really cool thing to like have him actually go up against Galbatorix and find out he's not overpowered, because Galbatorix is even more powerful than that, and it's power to a degree that doesn't make any sense. Because over the last century, Galbatorix has been searching for the name of the ancient language, and he finds it. He finds the name, which gives him absolute control over magic itself. So by the nature of that, he just completely renders Arya and Aragon and the rest of them just completely useless. And I thought that was really, really well done. I thought that was really nice, because it kind of makes all of his development and all his stat building and stuff more about him, and more about him becoming the person he needs to be to do this kind of thing, instead of just gaining the skills and the learning the spells that'll help him just fight like a bludgeon. So I really like the way in which we concluded. Like, Aragon is basically not able to do anything. Murtagh finds out the name of the ancient language as well, and he uses it essentially to try to help Nasawada primarily. And but when he does it, it essentially causes like a cacophonous kind of situation. So they all basically break out and like they're all starting to fight and stuff, and they're still kind of losing. At first, Galbatorix has Aragon fight Murtagh basically for his amusement, but ultimately they end up in the skirmish and stuff. And Aragon is like very, very frustrated because I think he's tied by magic and stuff, and like he's like moving, but then he stops and can't move, like that kind of thing. and he just kind of starts to think about everything that's going on, and he reaches this point of just desperately wanting Galbatorix to know all the pain he's caused and all the just terrible things he's done, and just kind of to, just to have any sort of empathy and not be the absolute psycho that he clearly is. And it works. Basically, they can't use any spells or anything because he's got control over the ancient language, but you can, as been established throughout the entire story, you can cast a spell without any use of the ancient language. It's just incredibly dangerous. But Aragon desperately wants him to understand what he's done. So the rest of the Eldunari pick up on this, Glader picks up on this, Saphir, so they all just, as a group, they all basically they concentrate all their power, and they will that kind of spell that's pure intent to work. And it, it lands on Galbatorix, and he just immediately starts feeling just all the pain from like the 100 years of all the dragons, all their pain, the pain he's caused the people, just all kinds of pain, to the point where he just can't stand it at all. He's begging Aragon to make it stop and stuff, and he can't, until he eventually just unmakes himself. There is a spell, and there's a way in which you can just convert all your physical matter into pure energy and essentially turn yourself into a nuke. And that's what he does, and basically blows up his own castle, and they use magic and stuff and shield themselves, and that's how they eventually defeat Galbatorix. I really like the fact that it didn't just come down to bashing swords or who's stronger than the other. It comes down to a fixture of character development, a part of the nature of Aragon and the world that we've lived in with him this entire time, the stuff that he's come to know and learn and love and all that stuff, and it just all culminates all that stuff, and that becomes the weapon he uses, not just the generic skills or anything. So I think from a just meta contextual level, that's just a really, really, really well constructed conclusion, because it is about the character, it's about the setting, it's about the world, and it's about the actions. It's not just a matter of who's got the most magic or who's got the biggest sword. So I think that's just really, really well done, and I can't sing the praises of it enough. Even though it feels like it happened fairly quickly, because most of it was Galbatorix just talking, and I love to hear him talk because he's just such a smooth criminal that way. But it was just him talking and stuff, and then they eventually get into it and everything, and it just kind of almost concludes immediately, because it kind of would, especially when magic is involved and stuff. So it felt a little quick in comparison to the way in which other stuff was slowed down based on the description stuff, but I think it still really worked really, really well constructed. So let's quickly kind of talk about some of the characters and the relationships, because I think that was also done really, really well. So I've said before that I like the characters. I think a lot of them are very kind of generic fantasy characters, but some of them are very, very extra unique and outside of the generic kind of stand-in fantasy characters. Like Murtagh, Arya, Nasawada, and Angela. They're my favorite characters. So I think Murtagh is a really, really cool kind of anti-hero type character. He's the character that needs redemption but doesn't actually get redemption. He's like a victim while also being a perpetrator of great violence and terrible things. So even though Aragon basically completely forgives him, he can't forgive himself, and it's kind of like he still does penance at the end, even though he could have just kind of gotten away with being forgiven and everything. And just the nature of who he is with his parentage and the way he was basically raised in what was essentially just a abusive situation and all this kind of stuff, and just the way in which he's developed, I think is just really well done, and I really enjoy Murtagh a lot. That's why I can't wait to get into Murtagh. And I have a physical copy back there on the shelf. But apart from him, I really like Nasawada. I really like this idea of this young girl kind of leader. It's a kind of subversion of a typical trope thing, but not so much nowadays, but it was in its day. And I think it's just really, really cool the way we kind of get to see all the back and forth and kind of the gray area and just the difficulty of leading and that kind of stuff. And in this story, her being captured, I kind of wish we would have got more of it. We got some stuff. We got, the beginnings of it and stuff. But by the time we get to Aragon going off to go, find the Eldunari and stuff, we don't get much. We don't get much more from it. Even though it was kind of well established towards the end, it's made fairly clear that Murtagh fell in love with Nasawada, and that's why he was trying to help her and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of implied before, he always found her pretty and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of the seeds and stuff are there. So it all worked. And I really like how basically his nature of redemption came from love. And that's kind of cool because we kind of get all these characters with all these different little aspects. So it's fun to see something that's both familiar but not done in a just terribly trite way. So yeah, let's also talk about Roran. So I really like Roran, even though I like his personality. I like the way in which the character is made, and like the way his personality works. But the function of him as a character is he's almost a Gary Stu. He is like without training because he was born. He was, grew up as a farmer and like suddenly became this just absolutely unparalleled like warrior. Like I get being strong from farm work and stuff, so being able to use a hammer is pretty good. But this dude like rises up in the ranks like every couple of minutes and it's well deserved. But he's also very humble and doesn't really want to do it, so you don't even feel like resentment towards him, like he's arrogant or anything. It just like it works out just so nicely. It's just so cleanly put together. And in any other story, Warren would easily be the protagonist, but like he's the kind of not even secondary. He's just like a background kind of side character, but a really cool side character, and I like him a lot. But ultimately, my favorite character has to be Angela. I think Angela is one of the most uniquely fun characters ever. She knows things, and we never figured out how she knows them. She just knew about the Eldenaria and the eggs and stuff. Like, nobody knows how or why. Like, she's just so interesting. I love her so much. She's such a unique character and one of the like identity markers of this series for me. And it just like blows my it melts my brain to think about the fact that they made that movie and was like, let's take this very interesting, unique character and let's just make her this random lady. Like that's like nowhere near as interesting as she's. I mean, granted, they probably had no idea how interesting she would become, but yeah, it's just like whoa. But yeah, I really like Angela. I think she's a lot of fun, and I really would like to know what else she gets up to because she's going to hang around and Allegation after Aragon is left, and Elva also. We don't get a lot from Elva, but I think that's a very fascinating character to create. A character that, like, you would think under most circumstances would end up becoming a fierce, loyal ally to Aragon because he blessed her and did all this kind of stuff. But it's a very understandable reaction that he screwed up his blessing, even though he warned them. I mean, granted, she was a baby, so she couldn't do anything. But he warned her caretaker and stuff that he's very ignorant of the ancient language. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but he would try and blah, blah, blah. So it's not entirely his fault that it went wrong and, what happened. But I think it's very fascinating to have a character like that who, like, she's so gray. She's so morally gray. It's so much fun. I like her a lot, and I hope she pops up in Murtagh. But I don't think so, because I think Murtagh is like, he's like, I'm just going to go away from everybody. So I suspect that will probably be a whole new branch of world building and stuff when we get into that one. All right, I don't want to spend too much time talking about relationships because this video is already going pretty long. But I do I like a lot of the relationships between the characters. My two favorite relationships are Aragon and Arya, and Aragon and Saphira. So I like the fact that Aragon basically has a crush on Arya the entire series, and he basically has no chance to be with her, essentially. Like, he basically has to go through all this level of development before she effectively even gives him the time of day. But in most stories, you would see, like, oh, now they're together, they're all happy and blah, blah, blah. But they both basically acknowledge their love for each other, and they're still not together. She goes off and be the queen of the elves and stuff and continue to be, like, an ambassador type person, and he's going to go leave and go train the new generation of riders and stuff. I really like that Christopher stuck with this idea that they can't be together. Because he really could have just like had Arya appoint somebody else as the ruler and just have her go and claim it's because she's a rider now she can't be a monarch. So like he really could have done that in order to keep them together as a couple, but he chose not to. And I think that was a far more mature and far more satisfying decision for those characters. But I'm probably going to end up making a secondary video at some point talking about fantasy characters and their companions. But if I do, it'll probably be like a ranking list or something like that. I don't know. But if it is a ranking or, a top 10 or something, Aragon and Saphira will be right up there at the top. Because I can't think of another situation of human and companion animal or creature that is more thoroughly fleshed out and more like emotionally true than this one. I mean, the closest comparison I honestly can come up with is How to Train Your Dragon, which might be just my bias because of dragons. I don't know, but yeah, like the way in which the bond between Aragon and Saphira, and even like Thorn and Murtagh and stuff, is illustrated. Pretty much all the dragons and their riders, like that, like closer than sibling kind of relationship. It's similar to like in the Wheel of Time, the way they have the bond with their warders and stuff. But I think it's far more intimate while also being far more innocent. I think it's just the most beautiful companion thing. It's literally like how I am with Kaladin, except just turned up to a higher level. If Kaladin could talk to me, like that kind of thing, you know. It's just, I think he just does this companion relationship really, really well. And like I said, I'm probably going to make another video where I go into greater depth explaining everything I think about it and the different aspects and nuances of that relationship, so we can be more thorough and talk about it a little bit more in that instance. If you're interested in that video, actually, let me know about it in the comments down below. Let me know if you want that companion comparison video. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I really enjoyed Inheritance. I think it was a great conclusion to a really good series, even though a lot of it was quite derivative and fairly generic. But I think when you're writing something that you kind of intend to be a classic fantasy style, almost a throwback, because clearly Paolini was thinking of stuff like Tolkien and like classic hero's journey, like Star Wars uses and stuff like that when he was writing his story. So like the derivative stuff, the derivative nature, I kind of, brush off. But like, I think the real part of the story that shine is like all of his unique touches. Like Christopher Paolini is clearly a fan of world building. He does an absolutely great job with world building here, and he just continues and continues. So I'm really, really excited to get into Murtagh because I hope he just continues to expand it. And it's been a long enough time since he finished these 4 books that his skill has to be much better than like even was in Inheritance. So that makes me even more excited to start Murtagh. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. We talked about it for a while, but that is my review for Inheritance, book 4 of the Inheritance cycle, the Aragon series. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Have you read the series? Did you read it back in the day when it was first coming out? How do you feel about it? Do you think about it differently now that time has passed, to compare it to when everybody's talking crap because of the movie? Let me know about that in the comments down below. And as always, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and if you're interested in the Patreon, of course, the link is in the description. So, as always, I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.